the majority of Minneapolis's city council is pledging to defund or dismantle the police department following the death of George Floyd. However, the city's mayor, Jacob Frey, opposes that. Protesters chanted, "Go home, Jacob," over the weekend after he said he does not support dismantling the department. Mayor Frey supports reform and says there needs to be a culture shift in policing. He joins us from Minneapolis City Hall. Good morning, Mr. Mayor. As we said, your own city council believes the police department can't be reformed, but you still do, though you say the elephant in the room is the police union. What do you mean by that?
Well, let me be exceedingly clear. We need deep structural reform to how the police department has done business for years in a way that has failed Black and brown people repeatedly. We need a full-on culture shift in terms of the way the police department does business. But am I for abolishing the entire department? No, I'm not. And yes, the elephant in the room is the police union, is the collective bargaining agreement. It's the arbitration provisions that are set up that quite literally prevent the chief and I, in many instances, from both disciplining and terminating officers who have had wrongful conduct. If we're really serious about reform, if we're really serious about changing the game, we need to attack those provisions.
How do you do that?
There's a number of different mechanisms to make sure that it happens, but so many of these provisions are deep-seated in state law. There are progressive chiefs and mayors coming before me that have been thwarted by those provisions. And it sets up a system. It sets up a system where we will terminate an individual. They go through a long bureaucratic process, and then in some cases, as much as a year or more later, the initial determination to terminate or discipline is then reverted. The individual comes back to the police department, the culture does not shift, and there is no accountability. We need changes in state law. In some cases, we need changes in city policy, but let's be very clear. We do need to go after the police union in many of these instances because that is where a lot of this culture has emanated from. It needs to change.
In your view, is that the primary reform that's needed?
I think there are many areas of reform that are needed. Yes, we need to be revamping our use of force policies, but in many instances, we're inhibited by state law. Yes, we do need to make sure that the accountability matrix is set up so that when officers have wrongful conduct, there are consequences. But without attacking these primary modes, you don't get the culture shift. Because here's the thing. In order to get a culture shift, you do have to a certain point, focus on personnel. And you can't get those serious personnel changes without two things. One, the ability to get the right officers in, and two, the ability to get the wrong officers out. So, am I for massive systemic reform? Absolutely. And I don't want to comment on precisely what the council meant by disbanding or ending the police force. I think there's varying opinions. But what I'm saying is, look, I'm not for abolishing, but deep structural reform, absolutely, we have to make it happen.
Well, you campaigned on reform. That's part of how you got elected. You have reformed the body cam policy. You have banned warrior training, but we still have the George Floyd incident. Is reform enough? I mean, you've got a city council, a majority that says they want to start over again.
Well, you're right in that the body camera policy has been more effective. We brought compliance from 55% to 95%. We were the first city in the nation to ban off-duty warrior-style training so that officers are not deeming someone a threat until proven otherwise. And here's a big thing. We have a chief in Chief Arredondo. This is someone who's from community, who literally sued the police department for racial discrimination and won. He's chock full of integrity, and he's now our chief. He is leading the way in terms of these massive structural reforms that we need to see. And I want to be clear, he has my 100% support. A full-on reshape.
Mayor,
I mean, we
Mayor,
can use
very
different
quickly.
words and talk about semantics, but yes.
Sorry, very quickly, Mr.
We
Mayor.
can see if
we
we
have
need
CBS News has learned. CBS News has learned there was a plea negotiation deal between former officer Derek Chauvin and the county prosecutor and U.S. Attorney's office, but that broke down before charges were filed. Were you aware of that?
No, I was not aware of the details of that. No.
Okay, so you're not aware of any negotiations at all that occurred.
No, we're not involved in the prosecution or the investigation. The pieces that we were involved in is, as soon as we found out, we said it was absolutely heinous and wrong in every sense. 2, we fired the officers immediately.
Mr. Mayor.
And then 3, I called for charges, and I think that's something that we need to start doing because it's the honest, and we need to acknowledge the truth.
All right, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Jacob Frey, thank you so much for being with us this morning.